Welcome to First Class Counselors, where we give camp counselors insider tips and advice on how to make a camper's summer the best it can be.
And because whether you are brand new to the camp world or this isn't your first time in the Gagaball pit, you and we know that camp counselors, the best camp counselors, the first class camp counselors, are the ones that are committed to a growth mindset and getting better every day. And that's why we do what we do here on First Class Counselors.
My name is Oliver Gregan. My pronouns are he, him.
And my name is Matt Wilfred. My pronouns are he, him.
All right, we're taking a series into account right now because Matt and I want to cover some stuff. So, what we're going to be doing for this season is we're going to have a couple of these small episodes that we're calling Demystifying the Camp Director. Really letting you get to know who is that person running camp? What are their motives? What are the things that they're working on? How do they make decisions? We want you to get a little glimpse into the life of that person who is kind of running everything that you're taking care of, right? And what that dynamic looks like between you and them. We've done an episode this season already on how to talk to adults. Now we're going to identify one of those core adults in your life when you are working at camp in the summer. So, Matt, what does today's topic mean to you and kind of this series that we're going to get kicking?
Well, I think, after being a camp director now, I'll be going into my seventh summer being in a director role. And uh, I think back to when I was a counselor and I didn't really know anything about my camp director. And I got a lot of things wrong and I made some assumptions that I wish I wouldn't have. Not that it damaged any relationship or anything like that, but it was just one of those like, oh, I would have just understand camp on such a different level, and I could have asked them questions, and I could have, really just. I think sometimes save myself some frustration, and I recognize that most camp counselors out there, and me as a 16-year-old camp counselor, wasn't about to like ask the executive director or the director of my camp these questions about them, like what do they do on a daily basis, what's your mindset, like I'm not going to do that. It feels awkward. So what we want to do with these episodes is to, demystify it a little bit and give and share some perspective. Understanding that all camp directors aren't a monolith, and we all think in different ways and have different, um, different modes of operating and different philosophies when it comes to running camp. And listeners of this podcast will probably understand Oliver and my philosophy when it comes to running camp. But whether or not a director is unique or different or not, we're going to try to use our perspectives and what we were thinking about when we were camp counselors to help inform this conversation. So that's why we're starting off with this first episode, is what we thought we knew about what our camp director was, and maybe we'll unpack where those thoughts came from and maybe what the case is now when it comes to those, or how we're looking at those questions now as more seasoned camp professionals. So we've got about six assumptions that we made. We'll see if we get to all six. I don't know if we will, Oliver, but we've got six assumptions here that we're going to unpack that I think will shed some light on what camp directors are actually doing and thinking about when you are interacting with them for those two short months of a whole year, right? Because for many camp directors out there, this is their full-time job. Not all camp directors, but 2 months is certainly the most like intense part of our year, but there's so much that goes into those 2 months. So maybe that'll be a future episode, but I think keeping that in mind too informs a lot of these like assumptions. So yeah.
All right, let's get started. And I'm going to go into a fun category here. And this is they only care about the money. It is the camp director's job to obviously think about a lot of things on camp, from programming and everything like that. But sometimes you get a conversation or maybe a decision's made and you go, well, that's not camper first, or I don't agree with that. This is what I believe it should be. And you have a camp director who, says, well, the price of camp has to be this amount in order for us to function. We're going to have to charge someone, even though it was an honest mistake that it got broken, lost, stolen, whatever it meant, whatever it was. We gotta charge them, right? It's not a fun thing, but these kind of things happen, and you may not always feel comfortable with it, but the camp director has to make that call, and they have to think about that budget on camp, right? So a lot of camp directors have the responsibility of thinking about things like their facilities. They have things to think about as far as their fundraising goals. They have things to think about as far as what their tuition for camp might be. So money is a huge thing on their brain, and I'm going to demystify or destigmatize this and say it's a good thing they're worried about the money, right? Think about a lot of other podcasts you might have listened to with a lot of other a lot of other camp professionals who said this very simple line: money moves the mission. At the end of the day, camp doesn't operate if it doesn't have money incoming, and it doesn't operate if it has money gushing out of it because it just spend,
Mhm.
right? Money does move the mission. Camp directors do have to care about these things. Somebody has to be on top of it. And unfortunately, sometimes that does mean making tough calls and decisions that are money oriented, right? They have a goal. There's something happening. Now, I personally work at a nonprofit. I love working nonprofit. I don't think I will move to private camp anytime soon for myself and my career decision. But um, it does not mean that even we are immune to having to care about money. Like I came into my time as a camp director and I was just surprised how much we have to think about it. Even something as simple as like budgeting, right? It's not just saying, hey, we can and can't spend this money. It's your plan for how that year's going to go. You know, what kind of programs are you going to add? When are they scheduled to come in? You know, how much, like, what kind of product you're going to have on site, right? Even down to what kind of food you're going to be ordering in the dining hall, right? You know, if I say we're going to put, you know, $8,000 versus $11,000, that extra $3,000 in food cost is going to probably make a pretty significant difference on what we're serving in the dining hall,
Right.
right? And that could be because our goal is to make sure kids have healthier food to eat, right? We want to make sure that there's dietary options that are available for kids. So we know that that has to come with a higher cost, and we have to budget for those goals. And you might still come in and complain that there is no dietary options for you. But you know what? There's a lot more dietary options than if I was only spending 8 grand a week on food. Um, and it's kind of cool if you look into the budget. One, it's a very eye-opening experience for you as a camp professional. I highly support camp directors who take the time to walk their staff through the budget during budget season, or even staff training at the beginning of the summer for that camp director to get up there and say, hey, look, my job is this budget. I need to explain to you what my thought process was. And as a camp director, I think that one of the most important things for you as a camp director is if you're making that budget, it's not based off of what you want. You base that off what your campers want, what your families want, what your staff wants, and you prioritize those things to make sure that you can get those things. But it doesn't mean you're getting everything. But you can justify to you those people that you're explaining how camp operates to that, hey, look, camp operates for the customer first, right? Because we wouldn't operate if they weren't given the money. But then we also have to take care of our staff to make sure that they're here because we couldn't operate if there was no staff present, right? So the ones who actually make the choice on how the budget goes is you guys. When you decide to turn off the lights at the end of the night and not leave them on, the electricity bill goes is lower. You're making a decision that openly helps you get the other things that you want. When you clean the cabin more efficiently and the cleaning crew doesn't have to spend 3 hours cleaning your mess after a week of camp, right? You're making sure the tape is off the wall or whatever might be going on. You take care of that thing. You're saving money that can go towards another program that you might want, right? All those things help. And at the end of the day, that budget is kind of also decided by you as a staff member throughout the summer. We're just the ones who get to kind of chart the path. So money is a big deal. I know I've talked about a lot of different things when it comes to this, and I am a huge fan of budgeting. It's like I honestly love budgeting season at camp because you can see how camp works. You can navigate what your plan is going to be, um, but also it allows you to kind of see the hopes and dreams that you have for your camp, which is great. I think it's awesome. So if you ever want to talk budgeting, as like either a first class counselor, right? You are in the cabin with kids right now, or if you are another camp director who just wants to talk budgeting with another camp director and wonder why or what you should price your camp at, whatever it might be, I enjoy those conversations. So my door is always open for a phone call or an email, and we'll go through it.
Yeah, I think that's a lot of great stuff, Oliver. I want to go backwards a little bit and think about like why we thought about that in the first place too when it comes to money. And I don't want to go too deep or we're not going to get to all these these awesome assumptions that we're talking about here. But like when you are a summer staff, we hire you to be in a specific role, and you are in charge of Oliver. I'm hiring you to be in charge of the waterfront, or I'm hiring you to be in charge of fishing, and we want you to be innovative and creative and on the cutting edge of the latest, in fishing and in the waterfront. And so, of course, your assumption might be, well, I can make this program better if I get the latest fishing rod, or if we always have a supply of the best worms, or if we always have the latest like water trampoline or something like that. And I think that it's not a bad thing, but what it's important to remember is that as directors, as Oliver was saying, we're accountable for the entire budget. And that is that when we budget, we make sure that the program areas are getting what they need. And we have to think a whole year in advance, because a lot of times we are accountable. If in the not-for-profit space, you're accountable to a board of directors, you're accountable to a group of people, and you can't just make up a budget off the top of your head. It takes deliberation and planning. And that's why like your input is really important, and you're not going to see some of those changes maybe in the same year where you make a suggestion, or in the same 2 years because you got to fundraise for it. Now on the other like on the same lens as fundraising, as a not-for-profit, and depending on how your camp works, even if you're privately funded, it doesn't matter. We are accountable for the money that we spend, especially when it involves donor dollars. People are putting their trust in us, whether even if like they're sending their kids to camp and it costs money. But people are putting their trust in us that we're going to use that money well, and that we're going to use it to set camp up not just for success this summer, but long term as well. So camps are saving money. Hopefully, they're saving money. Camps are thinking about long term building and sustainability plans. They're thinking about environmentalism, these very, very big picture things that go into making the budget. So I think like demystifying a budget, Oliver, I would go to that staff training session any day that you're running. But I think it's just thinking that big picture, and it's okay to ask like some of those questions. You might not always get the answer, but it's always good to like dig in a little bit when you can. But just remembering that there's a wider thing than your program area going on in those moments, and that the best camps that I've worked at, or the best camps that I've directed, are the ones that did not have the biggest budgets. And that's because staff do amazing things when they have that constraint. And I'm not saying we want to like artificially set that up with the camps that we work at, but I think when you have like only like pretty old costumes or limited craft supplies or some of those things, it forces you to be a little bit more creative and make that magic out of nothing, which I think is there's something to be said about that for the camps that are able to make that magic out of a few pipe cleaners and an old dinosaur costume that's missing an arm.
Yeah, I'm not going to highlight on it too much, but you're right. It's experience, right? If you're worried that you don't have the toy to do something, that's a problem, right? Like if you're like, oh man, like camp would be great if we had 1,000 trampolines. Well, yeah, like people would hop. But you know what? Like at the end of the day, if you're a camp counselor and you use what's in front of you, right? Like a blade of grass to like make that like bluegrass like
Yeah, yeah,
sound,
yeah.
right? There's an experience that's happening there that is an interaction between you and a camper that makes that experience great. And you know what the cost is? Grass. It costs one blade of grass for each of you guys. And you interacted with a kid and made their day and had like 10, 15 minutes with them. That's what makes camp matter. So, like, if you're thinking, oh man, I want to go work at the camp with the biggest budget and all the really cool toys, and like, man, they got wakeboarding and they got the coolest high ropes course I've ever seen. You're going to have really great tools to make sure kids have fun, but you're not going to have a skill set to make camp fun. And that's a big thing to think about, because one day you may not have those toys when you're going to entertain someone, right? Like you might not have that
Mm.
$1 million a year program or $1 million a summer program budget. So
Yep.
that's money though. We want to make sure we hit all these points. So Matt, come on, let's move on from the money. It's not all about it, buddy.
No, no, it's certainly not. Okay, this one I wanted to start with for my list because I think that we notice it as camp directors. And when I was a counselor, I don't think that I thought my camp directors noticed this, but when the camp director is around, when I'm walking around camp and I'm like, just taking in a program area or like hanging out with kids, when I was a counselor and my director did that, I'll call myself out on this first, is that, my posture got a little bit straighter. I got a little more enthusiastic. I was a little more conscious about, what I was saying and how I was running my program when the camp director was around. And I think the assumption that I want to draw out here, the assumption that I made is that camp directors are super judgy. So I should always be on my best behavior around them because they are constantly, you know, judging me and thinking, am I good enough or am I going to get fired? And everything is on the line when my camp director is watching in that moment. Um, Oliver, I'll put it to you first. Why did we think? I don't know. Did you think that, or and if you did, why? Why did you think that when you were a camp counselor?
Oh man. Yeah, 100%. I think your camp director comes around, your demeanor changes a little bit, and that's a good thing. I think like you have supervisors around, like there is a different counseling and different, you know, persona you're going to put on. You just have to be more professional, right? Like, yeah, that's not saying you go and kid around the kids past what you should, but like, yeah, you're gonna put a little stiffness in that back, you know. Um, and I will kind of on the contrary say, like, I am a little bit judgy. Like when I'm a camp director, walk around, I'm going to see what people are doing. Like I want to know that the program that we're running is really good. Um, but for me, like my training is teaching, right? So like, man, if I'm looking for certain behavior, certain aspects, certain things, I'm not being judgmental, but I'm calculating what I need to teach for the next time, right? I get judgy when I've taught the action and or I've put the expectation out and then it's not being followed. That's
Right.
that's that's when I'm going to be judgy. You can see it on my face that I don't hide it well. Uh,
Yeah, me too.
but um, but I think it comes from that fact of like they're in charge. They're the one who's approval. They have a power over you, right? Like
Mm,
technically, the camp director they can fire you if you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing. And you're young. Like I remember being young. I had this fear that and I don't know where it came from or why it happened, but I mean, even into my second summer, I had this weird feeling that I was going to come back from time off and I was going to like walk up the driveway and the camp director is going to be sitting there and be like, hey, look, you can't go back to the cabin. We're going to be letting you go. And there was no reason for this. I
right.
was not a bad counselor. I wasn't doing anything wrong. I just like had this guilt in my soul that I had so much responsibility taking care of these kids that if I
Hmm.
said or did the wrong thing at a certain point in time, it was all over. And that's not the case. Like there's an understanding that you are a young working professional, right? If you're intentionally doing things or you're repetitively doing things, that's a problem,
Right.
and someone should have talked to you. Um, but but you're allowed to connect with those kids. You're allowed to have conversations with them that help them grow as people. You're allowed to like play sports with them, depending on their age level. How in how strong you can go with that competition level.
Yeah.
But you shouldn't be scared when your boss comes around that you're always doing something wrong or they're going to come and lay down on you. And if they do talk to you, right, um, they're good camp director. Are they teaching you? Are they coaching you up? Are they giving you alternatives to the behavior that you're exhibiting that they maybe didn't like? Are
Right.
they encourage you to do something, or are they just telling you, "Hey, you're doing the wrong thing. Like, don't do that." Right?
Well,
That's not good camp directing.
and I think that like the feelings of that, like what you're saying, like I'm gonna walk up the road and get fired. I think it comes from two places. One, I think it's like insecurity because you aren't a master. Like no one in their first summer of being a camp counselor. Maybe by the end of your first summer, you've got it like figured out a little bit, but you're learning and you're growing. And I think the second one is that for a lot of camp counselors, they really care about the job. They want to be there. They've chosen that they are going to make a little less money. because they really love camp. Maybe they went there as a camper, or maybe they have some connection to the mission of the camp, that the stakes feel really high. And I think the stakes are high. We've talked about this, like in our Putting Campers first episode, we talked about how high the stakes are. But again, your director should should understand that. They should understand that you're learning and growing. Like you said, Oliver, their job is to coach, and their job is to get help you get better, to provide the type of experience they want to. And your camp director, like, it's a partnership. Your camp director, we need you to be doing amazing work. And there are certain things that, yeah, you're going to get fired for. And remembering that there is, or I hope there should be a policy manual that's going to be very clear about what's going to get you fired, right? And not facilitating a program the best it can be, or maybe not connecting with kids the best they can be, that's not one of those things that's like an insta fire. Like Oliver said, it's one of those things that, that over time, if you're not willing to try to improve, or you don't care, if you're just straight up negligent, then yeah, that's going to be a harder conversation. But we want to see you succeed, and we don't. When we're walking around, Oliver, like you said, I'm not judging, but I'm observing, and I'm thinking about what I have to teach. I would say too, I it took me a little bit, but I try to ask questions. Either like, what did I not teach in this scenario, or like, how had kids changed since I was a camp counselor, and why is this hard for this person, or what do they need, is a question I'm always asking. And I think it's a good thing when camp directors are out and around. We always want to be out of the office and be observing, because we have to collect that data through our lens. Because if the only like data about what's going on at camp comes through like the grapevine, through the supervisors, we're not seeing it directly, and we're seeing the filter of people maybe who are learning to be supervisors for the first time, and it might not be the most accurate or pure information. So for us to get out there and gather our own data set, is really important, because we care about camp just like you do. So it's not that we're out and judging in a way that, like, we're not judging whether your employment should continue, I think is what I want to say here. We're judging whether or not we need to do some reteaching or training or rebudgeting or anything like that. Because we have that growth mindset too. We think that camp can always be improving and always be getting better. And we think that about you folks as well as ourselves.
Yeah, and you hit a great point there, Matt. Like while we're observing, like we're thinking about maybe five different solutions to a problem that we're looking at. Like, is this something I could throw money at and fix? Right?
Right.
Like, is this an expense fix? Is this a training fix? Right? Is this something that like the staff could use more training on? We didn't train enough. Maybe the training was inefficient, right? So how do we go about that? I mean, there's even multiple routes in that category alone. Um, is this something that we are just ill prepared for, right? Are we asking ourselves to do a program that is outside of our jurisdiction, right? Like, am I trying to do ice fishing in Florida, right? That's not happening, right? Why would I bother buying a ice fishing tent? It
Right.
doesn't make sense, right?
Right.
Um, is there an opportunity we're missing? Maybe ice fishing in Florida is something, or maybe the ice fishing tent can be used in Florida for a different purpose, right? These are the things that are going through our mind, and literally, I feel like a crazy person because there are so many dead ends, right? Or there are so many ways through the maze that it's really tough for us to make the decisions and the thought processes and stuff. And sometimes other people have better solutions than we do, right? And then we look like idiots because we're like, I really thought this would be the way to handle it. And okay, so when we're not busy being judgy and looking over every single motion you do, we have things that we want to talk to you about in other categories. But right now, Matt, what's another point for you that you want to make sure that we didn't realize about camp directors originally?
For sure. The next one, I thought this as a counselor, and I feel this a lot when it comes to being a director now, is that the staff often think that I, as a camp director, or I thought that my camp director was too busy for me and too busy for my problem. And uh, that they're doing so many other things, or we see such a short glimpse of them. Maybe they look stressed as they're like walking through the playing field at camp, or they're on their walkie or their phone, and man, they're too busy for this problem that I'm having. And I'll first go into like where I think that comes from, and then Oliver, maybe you can give some advice on like what what it actually means, or maybe or like are we really too busy? Um, I think it goes back to that we as camp directors we try to maximize like every single moment. So yeah, sometimes we're multitasking, sometimes we're in meetings. We have our job is very wide. Like I said, it's bigger than just this camp job, and the staff notice that, and I think camp directors like should be talking about what their jobs are like year round. um, but I think the assumption just is that when I was a counselor I was like, oh, this problem is so small that you know I can just figure it out, I don't want to inconvenience anyone, or that if I go to my camp director with this problem, that it goes back to this like judgment thing, and that they're gonna like judge me because I'm having this issue with my cabin, or I can't get along with my supervisor, so I'm going to talk to them. That feels like I'm like ratting them out. Like I think there's a lot of that, again, insecurity about my ability as a counselor to like handle things or to deal with something, and that going to the camp director is going to look negatively on me. Does that resonate with you, Oliver?
Oh yeah, for sure. Like there are so many different reasons why you can feel that fear to come up to somebody who you think is really a busy person, the decision maker, and has a lot of power, right? Like if you think about it, like the peasants don't walk up to the king just randomly and have conversation. Like think about those like old movies, or even I
Right.
mean medieval movies. You have like the king on the throne, and then like for an hour a day, the peasants may come into the throne room and plead their case that the dragons ate their sheep. That's a Game of Thrones callback for anybody else who's calling it. But yeah, so it's super nerve wracking. As a human culture, we have not created a basis of going up the ladder to talk to. It's a struggle that we have been trying to develop for hundreds, if not thousands of years, right? So it's okay for you to feel that discomfort. And I think in more modern times today, it is not a pleb pleading to a king or queen. It is, a employee who has a concern that needs to be discussed. Now, um, if I'm like super overwhelmed one day and you want to come and talk to me about your boyfriend girlfriend problems, probably not. Like
Yeah.
everybody likes a little bit of hot goss every once in a while, but like
Not your employer.
not really as an employer, right? I will say like I will put this addendum to that a little bit, and that is like I've been working in year-round camp for a really long time. For the people who live and work on site constantly, right? I'm not going to say like relationship drama is a thing that should get into it, but like you are 100% more personable with somebody that you are living on the same property with year round, right?
Mm.
um there's still that professional connotation between the two of you, but like I'm definitely going to know a lot more about my staff's personal life for those staff who are living here year round than I am going to for the people who are going to just come for the summer. And when for the people who just coming for the summer, I'm going to care a little bit less about your relationship trauma. And I've talked about healthy relationships. I believe we have a podcast about it as well. So if you want more on that and what your camp director can get involved in, please take a listen or give a call.
It's like episode 3, I think. It was an early one.
Yeah, no, I think there was even one later than that where we talked a little bit more about it. So
Oh, true, true, true. Yeah, yeah.
there's multiple podcasts out there, you guys, multiple.
Well, I think when it comes to this kind of thing I think you're right, Oliver. There's a narrative that is so prevalent. The king and the peasant thing is really funny. And there is a reality that they're too busy for some things. You're absolutely right. And there's a lot of intention that goes into how we've created like the systems at our camp. The support structures are there to help you solve that problem. That's one thing. So we might divert this problem to one of like the camper support specialists or whatever that role is to help you with that thing. We could give some advice, but also sometimes when we're dealing with a bunch of other things, we can't get into the weeds too deep. But what we can do, Oliver, you said earlier, you're thinking of like 5 to 7 ways to solve that problem. Sometimes that's going to be as easy as like, yeah, we'll buy the thing, or we can make this switch, we can adjust this thing. It's not that hard. um, but you're leaving when you're bringing a problem to us or something to us. You have to understand that we're going to take your need in mind with the grand scheme of, again, this big picture, this other thing that's going on too. We keep coming back to this idea that the camp director's job is to see the big picture. So you might not get exactly what you want out of that interaction. So it's important to go into that knowledge with, but knowing that, I think for 99 out of 100 camp directors out there, maybe I'll just speak for myself. Like, I get some value from helping our team too. And even helping with some of those small problems, I might manage my time around helping with one of those things because it feels good to help people. And I think that's for everybody. So for me to be able to like help accomplish something, whether it be like, oh yeah, I know a product that will help with this. I'll buy it on Amazon, it'll come in a couple of days. That is something like accomplishable. And in the world of a camp director, not a lot of the things we're dealing with we're able to figure out in one day, right? Or in 1 hour. There's a reason why sometimes at camp I would mow the grass and the staff would be like, Matt, why are you mowing the lawn? That's so weird. It's because in that 1 hour I could mow one specific field, and that was the thing that I actually did today. So they are busy people. You can trust us as adults that we can manage our own time, and that we'll help when we can, or we'll direct the resources to help you, or give you some advice to help you solve the problem by yourself, um, too, because we like helping. So are we too busy for you as a camp counselor? Maybe sometimes, but we're never too busy for you to ask that question. And if it gets annoying, if we're like, hey, you're asking too many questions, I don't know if I've ever given that feedback to a staff member, first of all, but second of all, then that's just good feedback. That's good growth for you too, to work on solving your own problems.
And also, like, I'll put this out there, and I've definitely mentioned on other podcasts we've done, but the Benjamin Franklin small favors effect, right? Benjamin Franklin had a theory that if you ask for small favors, it makes big favors a lot easier to ask for, but also those small favors help you create a bond, right? So if I was to ask Matt, like, hey, can you hand me that pencil? That's such a small thing. It's so easy to do. Why would Matt say no to it? But now Matt and I are creating a relationship where it's helping. And I will tell you this, if you can think about a couple small favors, that if your camp director looks a little bored one day, like maybe they're having a really stressful day, you can get them out of that office for like 10, 15 minutes to, like, I don't know, like move some stuff, like move some chairs. It's just a simple, a mindless task that is not a decision making task, that can be done quickly, efficiently, and have a visual effect to it. If you were the person who's smart enough to get your camp director to help you out with one of those things when they need that moment, whoo, you are a killer staff. I am saying thank you for getting me out of the office and let me, de-stress for a little bit and do something really, really simple. It doesn't always have to be like something big, something small that, oh, I had to go help so-and-so move some chairs. They needed a hand. We got it done quick. It was great. Super awesome. All right. I'm going to bring up one of my points right now, and that is that camp directors don't communicate well. We are
Mm.
poor communicators, right? Didn't Instructions weren't clear. Didn't tell me soon enough. I wish there was more information about this. Whatever it might be, they don't communicate well, and this is one that I struggle with a lot. Like, I definitely get this comment as a camp director all the time. Oliver, you need to communicate better. You need to communicate. And I'm like, man, I have my phone on me constantly, you guys. Like, I'm texting, emailing. I am like running from one side of camp to the other to talk to somebody. Someone else wants to have a 15 to an hour long conversation with me about something. Like, I feel like all I do is communicate sometimes, and it's still not enough. I still didn't get that schedule out on time. I still didn't get like the memo about how the dining hall operation is supposed to be clear enough for everyone to understand, right? It's just like it's constant, or like, oh yeah, everyone has this day off, but someone wasn't in that meeting, so they didn't know, and now there's not a universal way to communicate amongst everyone. We have an event coming up, and Someone didn't put it on their schedule, and that's my fault. I apologize that you didn't put it on. I didn't put it on your schedule for you. I forgot I'm also your secretary, and you should have. And I should have known to prepare you for this. Sorry, I'm getting a little on a soapbox about it because I try my best to communicate and communicate effectively. While also trying to mind my own boundaries, right? Like I don't know if you know this, but 18 to 25-year-old staff, this doesn't turn off for them at 11 o'clock at night, and they want to text me, call me, ask me for advice about what's going on for work and stuff. Mostly text. And they're like, "Oh, well, can I like, am I working this weekend?" I'm like, "I have no idea." At 11 o'clock, after I just finishing watching the latest episode of Loki, I'm just trying to get on. I'm just trying to understand what's going on with the timeline, you guys. That's what I'm trying to do right now. So I argue that camp directors communicate to the best they can. If there's missing information, if there's something there, it's not because they're trying to not tell you or they are poor at communicating sometimes. Maybe they are. Maybe they are. Maybe it is true they're not a great communicator. But usually it's just because there are so many things they're trying to communicate, or that's the 80-20% rule, right? Like I'm going to communicate 80% of what I kind of want, and that 20% is your magic to throw on top that I just get to accept and know that it wouldn't have existed without you. So
Right.
your 20%. Sometimes it's bigger, sometimes it's smaller, but I've told you what I needed, and I'm just looking for you to do what you can do best.
Hmm. Yeah, this resonates with me a lot at this point because for sure I think good communication with staff is something that is an art form, and for us to remember, okay, I'm going to make this change as a camp director, so I need to communicate this to all of these people. And sometimes the only people that I can remember to tell about a change is the kitchen, because the meal's gonna it's gonna affect the meal, and I really need to let the kitchen know. And that's the most important person. The rest of the people, we trust that you can figure it out. But the other side of this that I felt the frustration as a camp counselor is I didn't understand. I felt like I always wanted to understand the why behind a decision that a camp director was making, and that I had to understand about like every single little thing. And I got frustrated when they didn't communicate that why. And I think transparency is something that's really hard as a camp director too, because sometimes there actually is certain information that we can't give out at certain times, or we're going to make decisions that just need to happen, and we need you to just be okay with it. That sometimes someone's going to be sleeping in a different space, and you don't know the background that's gone behind that, or we need to make a cabin change, and as much as it probably sucks that you need to like move this kid and tell this kid that they can't be in this cabin with their friend, there's a reason behind it, and sometimes we can't share it. Now, what I really try to do with the staff that I work with, I if I can't share it, I say I can't share this information. I can't tell you why, and I need you to trust me on that one. And that has taken a lot of rapport to build. And it doesn't, it's still gonna, people are still gonna feel upset or feel like they're not communicated to as much. But sometimes we can't. And but like you're right, Oliver. It's certainly not for a lack of effort.
Um, yeah, and communication's a tough game. Got to do it well. Got to try your best. And you know what? Both parties edit as they go along. So,
Yeah,
all right, Matt. I believe you got one more point, don't you?
I do. I think this one actually dovetails really nicely into my last point, the whole communication thing, and that is um, when I was a camp counselor, I thought that all my camp director thought about was camp, that their life was camp 24/7. And that's why, I wasn't a camp counselor when I had my director's phone number, because none of us had cell phones at that time. Again, old. But I would be okay asking them questions late or those kinds of things. I probably would have as a camp counselor, because I thought that that was all they did. And, and that's because that's all I did. If we're going into like where did that thought come from, that's because when you go up to camp for those 2 months or 3 months or whatever as a camp counselor, you literally live, eat, and breathe camp. It is all you do. From when you wake up, you're with the kids. From when they go to bed, and then whenever you get your time off, you get your time off. And I think that's my perspective on it. And what I want to demystify a little bit is just remembering that camp directors, a lot of them are adults with lives outside of camp. And this is going to sound incredibly judgy, because, of course, you have a life. Of course, camp counselor, you have a life that you are giving up to come to camp. There are sacrifices, but it is different. It's different than someone who is in their like late 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, who is balancing their established life on top of this thing that is very intense for 2 months, right? And a lot of us, some of us, sorry, I should say, some of us have families, some of us have partners, some of us have parents that we're taking care of, and there are big things happening outside of camp. That means that we can't be like super present all the time or communicating all the things all the time, and I didn't consider that as a camp counselor. And I really think that's the same as like, the old joke, like it's weird when you see your teacher in a grocery store because the kids think the teacher's just like they're at school 24/7. I think it's kind of the same thing. Um, but I think that if we're being like totally transparent, and which I'm happy to be, that sometimes I don't think that staff think about that for me. And it's not their job to think about it necessarily, but like if they had that kind of empathetic perspective, again, I think it would save some frustration and it would save some of those like, why aren't they responding? They don't care about me. It would save some of that tension that I think doesn't need to be there. That's my big soapbox one, Oliver.
Yeah, I think too is a yes. I do say I think about camp all the time, right? Like even when I'm watching Loki and thinking about the timeline, I'm thinking, could this be a theme for camp? I
Yeah,
don't know,
yeah,
maybe.
yeah.
Um, and like it's a question of do I think about camp all the time or am I working on camp all the time? Right.
Sure.
That's a big difference for the two. Um, so that's one. I think another thing too is you talked about yes, if you are a camp counselor, you are coming to camp and you are sacrificing a lot to be at camp, but you are also going into a culture that is built for you as well, right? The staff are your coworker, who are your coworkers are around your age. You are all interested essentially in many of the same things. You're all agreeing to come work with kids. You have a very social atmosphere to be in, right? Your camp director does not, right? They are technically a little bit older than you. They have to have a certain level of professionalism. And that means that like they can't have the same social life that you do at camp. So they are making a pretty big sacrifice. I will speak for, camp directors everywhere that, there's a struggle as a camp director to be social when at camp, right? Like you're not going to befriend the 20-year-old staff when you're in your 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, right? You and you are also prepping and working on camp all year sometimes, right? Like my job is camp 24/7 every single day from the day I wake up to the day I die. I am thinking about camp and everything that goes into it. Um, but that does mean, I have a family that I'm going to go to at night that I'm going to go and be around, right? If many of camp directors will have, you know, partners and children that they want to spend time with. Even if your camp director is single, like like myself, you are still going to want to have some form of a social life, and that is not going to happen with your 18 to 25-year-old staff, and it
Right.
shouldn't happen, right?
Right.
Um,
It's a good point.
um, but like full honesty, it's like I don't want to be alone for my entire life. Like I, as a camp director who is single, am still going to want to go to the bar and is still going to want to go on dates. My staff think that is hilarious, right? The fact that their camp director dates. Um, but like the amount of time that someone might put in their family, a camp director who is single might be trying to put that into making a family, right? And trying to get that done. So
Hmm.
um, we are not just thinking about camp. Like I'm trying to think about my personal happiness. I am trying to think about what I'm going to make for dinner tonight because to be honest with you guys, I love food so much, right? It is I love cooking, I love eating, the whole process of it. And what happens is when you've eaten camp food, the same chicken tenders for 10, 15 years, there's some things that come to your mind when you see chicken tenders again. And it's not yum, right? Um, like I'll still have a set of chicken tenders. I'm not knocking chicken tendies, but like, like the fifth time we're having chicken tenders this summer is not going to be, a pleasurable experience. So camp directors, like we've been in the game for a really long time. We've put our skin in. We now our bones and blood are in there too. So you got to understand, like, yeah, we think about camp. It's our life and soul, but our working camp is very different, right? Our working camp time is very different. So
Right.
that's a huge clarification for me. Um, so, but I'm always also like willing to talk camp. Like if there's a camp professional out there who like calls me and wants an hour conversation about camp, I'll make it a 2 hour conversation. So
Or about food. That'll get you.
yeah. Oh yeah. If you want to talk right now, I'm on a right now I'm on a slow cooked like braised beef I'm like recipe that I'm trying to master right now. And I like have done like three different types of short rib and I'm not getting it right now. And I'm man. And also, I got Thanksgiving to prep for. I love Thanksgiving. I'm gonna have my whole staff over here. We're gonna do a nice little friendsgiving for our on-site camp staff this year because I
Nice.
love cooking. My roasting pan is right over here to my right. It's ready to go. I found it at Goodwill. It's nice and big. I'm gonna put like a 20-pound bird in there. Sorry to
Nice.
all you Canadians who already had Thanksgiving at the point of this
It
one.
was delicious. I had a great Thanksgiving. Amazing. Oliver, you got one more to take us home, right?
Yeah, let's take us home. And this is they talk a big game, but they really don't know anything, right? So
Ooh,
we've
yeah,
talked
yeah.
about how, like, let me get my meaning across this is a lot of the times your camp director will come in and they might have observed something that they think needs changing, or they might have an opinion about like where camp should go or what the model is. And it's they don't really know. They haven't been around kids in a while. Maybe you have that like I don't want to call them an ancient camp director. They're not in it anymore. I have a great story about a camp director that I once had who he had probably been out of direct work with kids for about maybe 8 years at this point, and he decided he wanted to run a wiffle ball clinic for the kids. And whew, did we laugh, man? Watching this like higher 40s is probably how old he was at the time. Trying to run a wiffle ball clinic with like 20 kids on his own. Actually, I think he had a junior counselor with him. Um, it was like watching just pure chaos because he hadn't been in the game for a long time.
Mm.
That didn't mean he didn't know how to work with kids. It's just that like his brain and his like muscle memory and everything for doing it was just weaker than it was.
Mm.
But that doesn't mean that like he had never come up to me with advice and said, "Hey, you know what you could do when those kids are like running around with flaming sticks, right? You could have like a little area that is the flame writing area, and they can go and stand there and they can write with the smoke and the stick, and they have to point a certain direction. So now you've given them rules that they have to follow, but they still get to do the activity that they enjoy, and it's in a safe way to participate." And that was a like understanding that there are skill sets that you develop and they become stronger. There are skill sets that over time begin to weaken or maybe get a little bit rusty. And I think it's knowing that your camp director is a wealth of knowledge because they have most likely been through what you've been through. Um, but it's the same thing as uh, a retired NFL linebacker trying to get back into the game when they've been retired for 10 years, right? There's a great commercial right now where I think it's like um, Randy Moss and John Elway, and it's on the TV every single time football's playing on Sundays, and you see they're sitting on the couch and like, should we get out of retirement? And uh, and it like cuts to them like just being old men trying to play football, and they're
Right.
like taking a nap on the sidelines because they can't do it anymore.
Mm.
It doesn't mean that they don't know football. It doesn't mean that they don't have the ability to like catch a ball anymore. Like they still have those basics, but they're not going to be, putting up 3 touchdowns this weekend and 150 yards.
Hmm.
It's just not going to happen.
Well, and the conditions have changed, right? Like if I like your sports metaphor here, that like, like Bobby Orr, famous hockey player way back when, would get absolutely wrecked in today's NHL, right? Or like the goalies
I'm
didn't know
so happy that I have an American football
football, and
reference
I went, yeah.
and you have a Canadian hockey reference.
But like, but seriously, the goalies back in the day didn't wear face masks in hockey. They just took pucks to the schnoz, and like it's different. And I was thinking about this with your 40-something camp director, which I'm not far off of Oliver. So that's we're getting a little personal. No,
Upper 40, upper 40s.
only
You're not upper
33,
40.
only 33 here. But like also the conditions have changed at camp too, right? Kids have changed in the since you were a camp counselor, Oliver, since I was a camp counselor, and the game has changed in the ways that we directly facilitate with kids. What hasn't changed are some of like the outcomes and some of like the mindsets that we have when it comes to program design. Some of those things are pretty timeless, but when it comes to some things, they have changed. So, I think that there are certain things that your experience as a camp counselor today is different. Um, and I'll also go a step further in like the controversialness of this is that like there's some things that I don't know anything about. We have sailing at the camp that I work at right now, and as of right now, I've never been in a sailboat.
Oh
I don't
man.
I don't know how to sail. I'm gonna learn. I'm gonna get there. But even when I learn, I'm not gonna be the sailing instructor and I'm not going to like be a master of sailing. But that doesn't mean that I'm not able to look at sailing from a risk management perspective. I'm not able to like think about how we're teaching the instructions and how we're engaging people and making sure they know what they need to do to have fun and be safe. I know certain things that are universal program design things. Um, and just because we don't know the ins and outs about how to make a thing in pottery or what the best type of melty beads are to get, um, it doesn't mean that we're not able to be helpful and use our like diverse knowledge to do that. And or to find the resources that can help you with that, right? I'm connected through my camping association that I can bring a sailing instructor on site to like do run some of that professional training because that's easier than me getting deep in the weeds and learning becoming a master of sailing. That's not what camp needs, right? So um, I think like when as a camp counselor, when you play this like comparison game of like, oh, the director doesn't know how to do this and I know how to do this, then you're just like, it doesn't matter. All that matters is like, are we taking care of the kids? Are we doing the best that we can for them? And is camp running well in a way that we would be proud of? And remembering that there's many ways to get that and to approach that.
Yeah. Uh, I think your your camp director is going to be that person who is that wealth of knowledge, or can point you towards that knowledge. And they may try to spit knowledge, old man on a porch trying to give a life lesson. Um, and maybe sometimes they just want to get back in the game for a little bit, give it a try, see what it feels like to be a counselor again, despite whatever their age might be. You can watch them kind of fail miserably, but at the end of the day, like they care, right? They want to make sure that the best experience for those kids is possible. And they're going to do what they can to make it possible. So those are our points for what we thought we knew at the beginning and kind of where we're at today a little bit more. So um, if those are all of our points now, we're going to move on to our Eggle time, which is our ever growing, ever learning. It's a trick or tip or game or song for counselors to use to be better every day. And Matt, tell us who this guy is coming from.
The Eggle, as you might have heard from this season of First Class Counselors, is brought to you by Ultimate Camp Resource. And Ultimate Camp Resource is a website, a database, if you will, that offers more than 1,000 descriptions of camp games, skits, songs, and other camp related activities. And it's all free. There's no paywall. It's easy to access. And the activities that they put on there are really varied. So there'll definitely be something in there to meet campers of all ages and abilities. So if you're interested in checking them out, check out our show notes for a bunch of links. Of course, ultimatecampresource.com. And they also have a camp store where you can buy some cool camp gear at itsacampthing.com. And what we are doing this season on First Class Counselors is one of our Eggles is going to be brought to you by Ultimate Camp Resource. But Oliver, you did it last episode, but you go first again, and then I'll give my Ultimate Camp Resource one to finish off.
Okay, this one's going out to those first class counselors who are doing a little bit more on the planning side this year. They're in a leadership position and they're getting ready for what I call theme days or all camp days. And I'm specifically talking about the scheduling aspect of it. I'm going to give you 3 tips to create some better buy-in. So how to make that theme day super cool for your counselors and for your campers. And just by doing these 3 simple things. First off, make sure you are giving your schedule out timely, give it out early. So, whatever this might be for your camp, there's a simple rule: you give it out before the time off most staff have before that next thing is occurring. So, for example, for like day camp, you're most likely going to get that out there on that Friday meeting. So all of your staff go on out. Sorry, all your staff will be out for that weekend, and they can stop by and get some costumes and stuff on Saturday and Sunday for the theme that's going to start on Monday. If it's for your like overnight staff, maybe a week in advance, because everyone has a different night off maybe or a different day off throughout the week. So you want to get that to them timely, get it out so they know what it is. When you deliver it, do a 1-page story. All right. What's the story of that schedule, right? And how it falls along. So, and then actually write it out. Like we had the story of Buford this year at Camp Winona, and talked about it in other episodes. It was a monster in our lake, and there was a story that went through it. With the story, this 1 page that you're going to read off to your staff with the schedule allows them to picture this week, and it allows them to have an idea and things in their head that are going on that can help this theme come to life, right? Maybe you read something about like Buford's tentacles, and they find a way to have like a tentacle of Buford laying on the porch one morning for their kids to wake up to, and they go, "What is this?" And then the next thing is when you go to deliver this information, hopefully it's at like a staff meeting or something like that, or even when you deliver this to the kids on, that Monday check-in or that first opening campfire, you deliver it dressed up. You get into character. You are playing a role, and you allow your kids and your staff to be immersed in it. But I am saying do this for when you do the staff one as well. So when the staff get this, they are getting to see this in action, and they get to understand the culture of your camp is, oh, we like dress up, and oh, like we like put on funny voices. So you're like a pirate, and you're going to be like, all right, mateys, let me tell you a story about the 7 seas, right? And all of a sudden your staff are like, this man's crazy. I don't want to be here anymore, but tell me more. And that's going to really help you. So those are the 3 things: timely, a story, and deliver dressed up. Those are my 3 tips for my Eggle this week. So really, you're getting 3 for the cost of 1 Eggle out of me.
Wow, that's so generous of you, Oliver.
I'm a giver.
My Eggle this week is, like I said, from Ultimate Camp Resource, and it's one of my favorite team building activities. They have a whole section on team building that I'm sure gonna go back to once in a while because we do team building every staff training, and this activity is one that I really love. I call it the Trust Run, but the link that I will put in our show notes, they call it the Trust Tube. And essentially, it is when you take 2 lines. So the way you set it up, give everyone a partner. You need about like probably 10 to 16 people to do this one. Everyone gets a partner and stands across from them about like arm's length apart, so that and then the partnership stands side by side, so you're creating a tunnel or a tube in this case. If you're standing shoulder to shoulder with a bunch of people, you have 2 straight lines, people with their arms out in front of them, and then It's a trust exercise. There's one person that goes out and then walks through this tunnel where everyone's arms are outstretched, and then one at a time the people raise their arms up. And but it happens like right as the person gets close, so what was once like a blocked tunnel is now a completely open tunnel that they're walking through. But it takes some trust that they're actually going to raise their arms, and when you get good at it, you can start people moving really really fast, even a full sprint through the line because the group has practiced. Of course, there's a safety thing. Make sure you're playing on an area where if someone slips or trips, that they're landing on grass, not gravel or pavement. And don't move up to running until you really trust that the group is going to take it seriously and properly. And don't be afraid to end it if they're not there, and pivot to something else. So the trust tube from Ultimate Camp Resource is my eggle.
It's a great game, great way to start opening trust in your team building. So if that's a big focus for you, this is like one of those nice early propless games you can do to start getting things going.
Yeah.
I love that one. So that's today's show. If you enjoyed everything, we'd be so grateful that you left us a review wherever you're listening to this podcast. Your ratings and reviews not only tell us what you like and don't like about the show, but also helps boost our rankings to help more people discover all this good, sweet information we're giving out.
And after you have left us a rating and a review, you can share the podcast with a friend. Take another camp counselor, someone you're excited to work with next summer, and send them this episode or one of our many episodes. That word of mouth will really help the show. And if you like something that we talked about on the show, and you want to see a link to Ultimate Camp Resource or anything that we talked about, you can find our show notes at gocamp.pro/FCC.
Yeah, I heard the algorithm. You just press the button. You don't even have to actually share it. If you just press the share button, it even starts putting it more out there for other people. So just by clicking share, you mathematically make it more likely that other people will find this information. So you don't know who to share it to. Perhaps you just let the algorithm monster figure it out on its own.
I like that.
But that's the show today, you guys. So thank you for listening, friends. Camp is camp, and camp's all good.
Do you want to? Do you want to say camp is camp and camp's all good? I don't think good picked up.
Oh, darn it. Yeah. Thanks for listening, friends. And remember, camp is camp, and camp's all good.